Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Wrestling for Life Network. It's going to be a fun one here on the channel, folks. We got lots to talk about, lots to get into, and it's going to be a crazy show today. Make sure you get in, hit like, share, subscribe. But me and the gentleman next to me got a lot to talk about, lots of things to get into. So make sure you get ready. Let's go. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Mr. Evan KJ White, the Iron Man of YouTube. Welcome back to the Wrestling for Life Network. But you guys aren't concerned about me today. We are here to talk to the gentleman next to me. We've seen him on ESPN. We've seen him cover combat sports for over a decade, and now an author of Say Hello to the Bad Guys, a book that has taken the wrestling world by storm. Sir, how you doing? Thank you for being here today.
It is my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're busy, man, busy schedule. So we're thrilled that you fit us in, and we're looking forward to talking about, Say Hello to the Bad Guys. But I guess before we get there, we get into the book, and I know you've been touring around talking about it a lot. I just wanted to touch on, for our fan base out there, your journey. How did you get here? We know you covered combat sports for a long time. Then now you're with NFL. You're covering the Atlanta Falcons, and now you're an author. How did that all come to be?
Boy, it starts a long time ago from the old days, from me being a wrestling fan for really my entire life, back to when I was 5 years old. Some of my earliest memories were just being a fan and watching wrestling and, trying to find and consume as much wrestling content as I could as a kid in the 90s, right? I was born in 84 and I started watching wrestling in 90 with Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan. And I've been a fan really ever since then, and just kind of like being a fan and getting the opportunity on a few occasions to write about wrestling and do stuff with wrestling video and whatnot for several different places, SB Nation, now ESPN. So I covered I've covered kind of everything in my life, as far as journalism. Every sport you could possibly imagine I've covered, from high school to the pros. And while I was with ESPN, and I've been with ESPN for 6 years, and I covered combat sports for 11 years total, and 5 years with ESPN. And in 2019, I wrote about the NWO going into the WWE Hall of Fame for ESPN.com. And it was a story that was very near and dear to my heart because I was 11 when the NWO started. And I remember, that era just vividly and with great fondness. So I put like a lot of heart and soul into this story when I didn't really have to, right? It was kind of like a small assignment, just like a Hall of Fame induction news story. But I put like some chutzpah into it, right? And a year and a half later, I get an email from an editor from Simon and Schuster, one of the biggest book publishers in the world. And this editor saw that article on ESPN.com. He wanted to work on a book about the NWO, and seeing that article, he felt like, okay, I think this is my guy, that I'm his guy. And, we spoke that day, and that's how it all came together. We vibed right away about like what we saw as the influence of the NWO and wrestling in general. And then it was just kind of, off to the races. I had to figure out how to write a book, and now here we are.
No, absolutely. That's super cool. And a very similar story as far as, early 80s, getting into it. Hogan Warrior that you reference is insane. And of course, we saw the impact of the NWO as wrestling kind of hit that boom. Now, was there any hesitation or any concern from your part on covering something like the NWO in the sense of it's been covered a lot over the last couple decades? So how was your kind of process going into it and getting the ball rolling?
Yeah, it's been covered a lot without a doubt, right? And I've consumed all of that because I'm a big fan, and I remain a big fan of wrestling. I'm wearing my Bruiser Brody shirt today.
Nice.
and Colin Brody. Like I watch everything, and I've studied wrestling for a long time. I've read a ton about wrestling. So that topic was, I was aware going in that this was something that has been done before in documentaries, mainly. And I feel like a book is a little bit different. There's
Yeah.
never been a book about the NWO,
Hmm.
specifically, right? And this book is also not just a book about the NWO. The biggest thing about this book, one of the most important things about this book is how all of that ties into American culture. That's why the
Yeah.
subtitle is How Professional Wrestling's New World Order Changed
Yeah.
America, because
Love it.
that's what the book is about. It's about the NWO, but it's also, using the NWO as a vehicle to discuss how wrestling more generally has influenced American culture. And I think it
Yeah.
has a great deal. And that's the big difference between this book and really anything else that's been put out in book form, is it talks about wrestling on the level of something that influences and impacts American culture, which is not often done, especially by a major publisher like Simon and Schuster, right? They
Yeah.
took a chance on this, and they're I'm grateful, that they were able to kind of share a vision for wrestling that I too have, and that's kind of the big takeaway from this book.
Yeah, it's a really amazing approach to everything, and the idea that wrestling transcends the actual sport or the entertainment side of it, where everything's kind of covered in that bubble. For you to kind of expand on the impact outside of that is a pretty cool way to go about it.
Yeah, I've long felt this way, right? I've
Yeah.
long felt that wrestling is everywhere in our culture. You can see it in so many different things, whether it's media, politics, sports, cable news. I mean, everything. There is that kind of manufactured conflict. We love manufactured conflict.
Yeah.
We don't like to think of it as manufactured, even if it is, but we love it in this country. We love watching people argue with each other on
Yep.
television. The highest rated sports shows and cable news shows are all people arguing with each other. They're just cutting pro wrestling promos on each other on
Yep.
on a nightly basis, right? And we love that. We love
Hmm.
that. We love that in our reality television, and a lot of that comes from, or is at least adjacent to, pro wrestling. And I would even go further and say social media, right? Social
Yeah.
media is, people are putting on these personas, these characters on social media. It's not really them on TikTok and Instagram,
Right.
right? It's maybe a version of them, but it's
Absolutely.
not the real person. And that's very similar to what pro wrestlers do every
Yeah.
day as a performance art. They play kind of a version of themselves that's not quite them, but it's a version of them that people want to consume, as far as what their content they're putting out, the same way that we do on social media. So I just find it, the examination of wrestling as culture, and wrestling as something that has helped shape our culture, is a really fascinating discussion to
Yeah.
have. And that's what the book is about, in essence. And I think it's an important, it's important to me to, just as a wrestling fan, I love sharing wrestling with others. I love
Yeah.
sharing wrestling with people who have not been exposed to it, who are not fans, who don't know a whole lot about it. And this book is kind of a way for me to do that on a broader scale, where I can say, hey, read this book and learn about how wrestling from the '90s until now has helped impact things in your everyday life that maybe you didn't even realize.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, you expanded beyond just, interviewing the wrestler. You went to sociologists and experts,
Hmm.
and I thought that was a real interesting aspect of the story was, getting those perspectives and how it directly correlates.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of what separates this book from the rest, right? The other many things that have covered this era of wrestling. It's because we are having the conversation about how wrestling and culture have gone hand in hand, and how one is taken from the other. And
Hmm.
in 2025, it's extra, I think, important and extra significant to look at, because the president of the United States is in the WWE Hall of Fame, right? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, The Rock is the biggest star in Hollywood. It's like all of these things are, Bad Bunny, he's one of the biggest artists in the world, right?
Right.
Sells out his entire tour, the stadiums. And he wrestled at WrestleMania, and he headlined his own show in Puerto Rico. So it's like people are fans of him and The Rock that don't know anything about wrestling,
Yeah.
right? But these are people that have been influenced by wrestling. And it's good to know, to elevate that conversation about why wrestling is important is so critical to me, because back in the days of Shakespeare, his work was considered trash. You know, it was considered
Yeah.
lowbrow,
Yeah.
trashy, like for the rednecks of the time, for the poor people of the time. And
Yeah.
it was only until years later when it was examined, you know, with a more keen eye, did it become, you know, elevated and prestigious, right?
Yeah.
And I think that wrestling has a lot of parallels between that. It's thought of as this kind of like lowbrow thing, and it's like, oh, it's fake, and you know all the, you know, KJ, you know
Yeah.
all of the stigma that is surrounding wrestling. Like, let's forget all that. Let's examine it for what it is and what it's done. And the NWO is a great vehicle for it, and the '90s is a great vehicle for it because it was so big in the '90s, and we are far enough removed now to take a look at it in a critical way, because you can't evaluate things that are happening right in the moment. You need some
No.
space. You need some
Hmm.
space. You need some time to go by, and then you can go back and see, oh, this is how this affected this, and this is the domino effect, and so on and so forth. So that's a critical part of the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think, covering wrestling as much as we do, that is one of the things, the stigma and the idea of like, no, it's not. I mean, the stereotypes that come along with it, but trying to break those down and understand why we do. And I, use the example that it's, just like a soap opera, just like any other form of entertainment, which you
Yeah.
touched on. We love when you sit two people in a room and have them scream at each other, manufactured or otherwise. It brings eyes for sure.
Yeah, yeah. This is a crazy story. So I'm on a podcast a few nights ago, and the host of the podcast, it's a wrestling podcast, right? The host of this podcast told me when he first got married to his wife, you know, she would
Hmm.
go in the shower and he would put on like wrestling. But
Uh-huh.
as soon as he heard like the water go off, he would like flip the channel because he didn't want his wife to come out of the shower and see him watching wrestling like it was porn or something. Like it was something
Right.
like, you know, lascivious or lewd. It was just pro wrestling, and like that underscores the stigma, right? You know, this is
Yeah.
something that someone that he married, and he didn't even tell her that he was a wrestling fan, right?
Yeah.
Now the cat's out of the bag, right? He's a host of a wrestling podcast, but that
Right.
was just so crazy to me that the stigma still survives at that level, that you won't even tell your loved ones that you're a
Yeah.
wrestling fan because you're embarrassed. Like, why are we embarrassed by this? Why are we humiliated,
Yeah.
and why are we letting other people, you know, ruin our enjoyment of something that I find to be a very, you know, a beautiful art. You know, once you kind of like drop your guard and kind of like allow yourself to just appreciate it for what it is. Like, I don't know why that still exists, and I'm hoping that, you know, books like this,
Yeah.
KJ, like can help, you know, end that stigma and bring wrestling more to the forefront and more to the mainstream, at least in the conversation about how, you know, it's shaped culture and how it's an art like so many other things.
Yeah. I think in my household, the trade off was I'll watch some 90 Day and some TLC programming. You got to watch the wrestling when it's on. So,
Just as much of a work as wrestling, those
right.
shows, right? I mean,
Yeah. That's the best part of like, I can't believe you watched that trash. I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Now, as far as the book goes, you're going to get into how did you start this program? Where did you begin? There's so much to kind of pull back with
yeah.
everything in this topic. Where did it start for you?
Well, the first thing that I wanted to do right after I got that email was I wanted to get in touch with Eric Bischoff, because I felt
Hmm.
like can't really write a book about the NWO without interviewing the NWO creator, you know,
Yeah.
for an extended period of time. So I sat down with him. I had a meeting with him in Jacksonville, Florida in May 2021 at a Dave and Buster's, and we talked. It was a brief conversation, and basically told him who I was, you know, what I was doing, and that I needed his help. You know, I needed to sit down with him and talk to him about the NWO for a while. And he said, you know, whatever you need. And he totally followed through with that 100%, because
Yeah.
2 years later, I flew to Cody, Wyoming, where he lives, and I sat
Yeah.
down with him for a couple days, and you know, many hours of chatting about the NWO. And you know, I can't thank him enough for his courtesy. And you know, I met his wife. I went to his home. It was really an incredible you know, time, and I was able to ask him pretty much everything that anyone could ever want to ask about the NWO. So that was crucial. You know, I went back and I watched over 500 hours of WCW programming
Yeah.
from '96 to '99, just so I would have a really good working knowledge of the product, because when you're interviewing people from, and these are things that happened 30 years ago, they don't remember
Yeah.
everything, right? They don't remember. They might remember some things, but the detail of when it happened, who
Yeah.
was there, where it happened, that type of stuff, that tends to fade over time, right? So I wanted to
Absolutely.
have a really good idea before I started really doing the bulk of the interviews about what was going on. I took a ton of notes.
Hmm.
Again, I had like a really good knowledge of that time period, and I had to.
Hmm.
And then I went out and I interviewed almost 100 people. Bischoff being one of them, and a lot of behind the scenes people, a lot of wrestlers. Sociologists, like you mentioned, college professors. I
Yeah.
interviewed Andrew Yang, a presidential candidate. I interviewed
Yeah.
Jay Leno, who was who wrestled back in the day.
You
And
did.
I really went to work, and I did all the legwork that was necessary to really hone in on not just what was going on during that period, but how the chain of events that affected, again, America.
No, absolutely. And I mean, was the reception? Now you said Eric was very welcoming. As you kind of work through the process, were most people pretty receptive to the process?
Yeah, most people were, for sure. It's hard to track everyone down. Luckily, I have a
Hmm.
journalism background, and that's something that I've been good at.
Yep.
Most people ask me like, "How did you get my number?" And I'm like, "Well, it's my job. It's what it's what
Right.
I do." But yeah, I mean, for the most part, pretty good. I wasn't able to get a hold of Hulk Hogan. I talked to many intermediaries and people that represent him, and I just
Yep.
was never able to kind of hammer out a time to talk to him. So that was a bummer. Didn't get a chance to talk to Kevin Nash for as long as I would have liked. I wanted to sit down with him in person, but we spoke on the phone, and he's been through a hard couple of years, and
Yeah.
all hats off to him, and I appreciate him very much as a performer and as a human being. But yeah, for the most part, once people got past the, like, two things: how'd you get my number, and I may not remember everything from 30 years ago, then it was pretty smooth sailing.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's great. And I mean, it makes it a lot easier. And you've touched on it, but I thought part of it was real good to touch on so many people around. We've heard Hogan's take on it. We've heard Nash's take on it,
Yeah.
but you talked to Jimmy, you talked to agents, you talked to a lot
Yeah.
of people that were able to come in and offer another aspect to this perspective.
Yeah, that was really important too, right? Because we have heard their sides of the story. Like, one of my favorite interviews in the entire book, KJ, was Ellis Edwards,
Yeah.
and that's not a name that most fans have heard of, but you're definitely familiar with his work. He was the WCW stunt coordinator, and then
Yeah.
he went on to be the stunt coordinator for the WWF, WWE, and now he works a little bit with AEW. And he was the guy responsible for Sting rappelling down every
Yep.
Monday night from the top of the arena. He was the guy that rigged it up and made sure it was safe, and someone that was very good at his job, and did things that really were not done before in wrestling. And it was really incredibly illuminating to chat with him. I sat down with him in Atlanta, and we talked for many hours, and he told me some incredible anecdotes and stories about Sting, and about so many other things that he worked on too, like when the Steiner brothers, when Hall and Nash and Six were following them in the car, and the car flipped
Yeah.
over. He told me how they did that and everything, and he was really one of my favorites to talk to, because he doesn't talk to many people. He does not do many interviews, but I was lucky enough to chat with him, and that stuff is in the book.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now with that, and I again, very cool because you do offer these new perspectives, or perspectives we haven't got a lot of. Any standout kind of you talked about the stunt coordination, but any other kind of standout moments where you're kind of sitting there going, "Wow, I as a wrestling fan, I never thought of that, or never realized that that was going on." Any kind of those light bulb moments?
Several of those, for sure. I think the biggest one was probably the NWO logo. Like, no one knew who
Yeah,
designed the NWO logo for almost 30 years.
that's
And I still
crazy.
find that to be just insane, because it's one of the most iconic logos in American pop culture, over the
Yep.
last 30 years. And, no one knew who did it. They didn't know the individual. They knew it was done at Disney MGM Studios, and that was true. But no one remembered, like, who was actually at the computer, with the program, putting that onto the computer, and then printing it out. But I was able to track that person down, and she's a real estate agent in Winter Park, Florida now, and she hasn't
Okay.
really thought about design or logos in a long time, and it took a lot of reporting to find out who that was, because literally no one knew, like, no one the most that I got was like she was blonde, you know, and her desk was in the corner of the office. And I'm like, oh, that doesn't really help me all that much. But I was able to, like, again, you know, I've been a journalist my entire adult life for 20 years now, and you know, I have a good background in finding people, you know,
Yeah,
finding out information, right? That's part of my job, and I was able to track her down. It took me, you know, many weeks to do it, but I did, and that, you know, again, I'm hoping that she gets the credit now that she deserves for doing something that so many people have duplicated and worn, you know, on their chest.
everywhere. Yeah, we've seen that logo everywhere for
Yeah.
decades now, and like you said, iconic. It's still on T-shirts today. No, that's extremely cool. Now you get through the book, you get it done. You're excited about it. It's your first book,
It
and
is.
it's out there. How did that feel? What were the nerves like? I've seen you talk about it in several places where
Yeah.
it's that uneasy. Like I did it, but did I do it?
No, totally, man. It's hard. It's hard. Like, I mean, you know this because, you know, you create content, and
Yeah.
you know, you put yourself out there, you know, to
Hmm.
be judged, right? To be, you know, to have people be critical or positive, right? And that's there's a certain sense of vulnerability, right? When you do that, right?
Yeah.
Anytime, I'm sure you feel that when you know, every podcast you do, you
Yeah.
know, there's a certain sense of, like, you know, I'm putting myself out there. I'm being vulnerable. And a book is like, I mean, I do that in my regular job, right?
Yeah.
I write, you know, for a living, and I
Yeah.
do video stuff for a living. But a book is a whole other deal, right? Because that's something that, you know, you're asking people to pay for directly, right? It's not just an
Yeah.
article that you click on ESPN.com.
Yeah.
And that's difficult, you know, because, you know, I am a wrestling fan, and again, I have been, and I'm a hardcore fan that follows everything. And it was really important for me to, like, serve those folks as best as I could, despite the fact that it's something that it is a tale that's been told, you know, many
Yeah.
times before. So it was really important for me to try to give those hardcore fans things they didn't know, and you know, at least give them value, you know, for what
Yeah.
they're doing. And I hope I did that, you know.
Yeah.
And but also, the hardest thing about the book, man, was like, I needed to serve those hardcore wrestling fans, but it's a big book. It's Simon and Schuster, right? It's not
Yeah.
it's not something that's just for wrestling fans. It's something that's
Yeah.
like on Target, you know, in Target and in Walmart, and it's like
Yeah.
in Barnes and Noble. So it needs to also be something that is accessible to people that are not big wrestling fans. Maybe they're casual fans, or maybe they were big fans in the 90s, but they aren't anymore, and they want to, you know, reminisce and get that nostalgia rush from reading the book. So that was the biggest challenge of writing the book, was like, how do I balance, like, the multiple audiences for this book, the lapsed
Yeah.
fans, the non-fans or new fans, and the hardcore fans. And that is no easy task, to be honest with you, because, you know, it's hard enough to serve one, you know, target
Yeah.
demographic, right? Let alone three. And I tried my hardest, and, you know, I had good editors and everything. So I feel like I did that. You know, I'm proud of, you know, what we were able to produce with this book. And yeah, I just hope people enjoy it. And I hope that, you know, again, the biggest thing to take away is just, like, this is kind of like my love letter to wrestling. You know, I want people to see wrestling in a similar way that I do, as something that is, again, it's an art, and it's something that has had a lot of influence and impact, and it's an incredible entertainment medium.
100%. And that's why we do what we do, for that exact, feeling of it. It's more than that. And you kind of, dial into quote unquote a lifestyle with it. Now, you said you keep up with the current product and you're still a fan. I think we've talked a lot about over the last year of like the resurgence and kind of seeing mainstream media grab onto a lot of the wrestling again
Hmm.
and kind of get, a little closer to the heyday of when, you saw the DX logo, the NWO
Yeah.
logo, the Rock logo, Austin. I mean, it's got to be kind of, as a fan, as somebody that's, doing what you're doing, it's got to be kind of cool to see that happen again, and people come to the forefront. Wrestlers seem to be everywhere across social media, across mainstream media right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's so cool seeing WWE on Netflix, right? I mean, that
Yeah,
is that is pretty cool. That, you know, even if you're watching, like, I'm watching Squid Game right now, and you're getting, like, WWE ads
yeah,
on Squid Game, and that's really cool. You know, that's mainstream, and that was not always the case in wrestling, right? I mean,
yeah,
I still think that stigma still exists to a degree. I don't think it is as bad as it used to be. because wrestling is kind of more exposed now
Yeah.
to the mainstream, and on Netflix and so many other like outlets. But I do think that right now wrestling is in the you can't say that it's as big as it was in the 90s, because
No.
it was a different time and there was not as many things for us to be doing in the 90s, right? Cable
Yeah.
TV was a major thing, and it's just
Hmm.
not anymore. But I do think that it is as it's a, it's bigger now than it has been since the 90s. I'll put it that way, right?
Yeah.
It's bigger now than it has been since the 90s.
For sure.
I don't know if it'll ever get to the point where, I mean, more than 10 million people were watching on
Yeah.
Monday nights in like 98
Crazy.
and 99, it cut into the Monday Night Football ratings.
Yeah.
I don't think
Insane.
that's going to happen, to that extent anymore. Especially now with all, so many things that we have, we're just watching stuff on our phones now, right? We weren't doing
Absolutely.
that in 96.
No.
But I do think that wrestling is easily adaptable to this new digital age, because it
Yeah.
is so easy to watch a wrestling clip on social media. And I think that helps, because it is
100%.
digestible in like short form, the same way that it can be digestible in long form. So I think it is an art that, it's not going anywhere, right? I
Yeah.
think that the internet age has almost even helped it to a degree.
Yeah.
I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see that, and I'm hoping that in another 30 years, maybe someone's writing a book about this era of wrestling and how that influenced things. So that would be cool. Maybe it'll be me when I'm when I'm old.
There you go. There you go. Right? When you're old. I like that you said that because we're about the same age. So we're not old yet. We're not old yet. But
Not quite.
now the book comes out. I've seen some people talking about it. What's the reception been like? What's the feedback within, especially within the wrestling community? How are you feeling about the vibe that it's created right now?
I think it's been super positive. Like most things that I've seen are positive, and
Yeah.
I tend to harp on the negative more than the positive. If I'm being honest, I think that a lot of people are
Yeah.
like that, right? But I can't say that it hasn't been mostly positive. So happy about that. I'm excited about more people reading it and more people spreading the word about it. And again, like give it, as fans, give it to your, you're done reading the book, give it to someone who's not a fan, give it to your
Yeah.
wife, give it to your sister, give it to your, someone in your life that maybe has watched wrestling with you but doesn't quite understand it. I think this is a book that, again, it's easily accessible to non-fans. It really is. At least that was the goal, right? To make
Absolutely.
it accessible to non-fans to a degree, so that it doesn't, you don't get totally bogged down by all the inside stuff. I tried to explain some of that stuff and how it applies, but yeah, I mean, it's exciting and daunting that it's like out there in the world now. People have been sending me photos like from Barnes and Noble and stores, like, oh,
Right.
it's out in the wild, and it's like, oh wow, like people are picking it up and people can see it like in on display. It's
Hmm.
cool, man. It's cool. And I don't even know if it's completely set in yet, because I've done
Yeah.
like I think over 50 interviews, and I'm just
Easy.
like, every day it's just been me promoting it and talking about it, and I haven't even had a chance to just kind of like sit down with my wife over dinner and just like because we've been running, we've been
Yeah.
running like crazy. But it's been, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, KJ, because I'm not. This has been like an incredible experience, and I've met and I've talked to so many wrestling fans, and it's like always a good it's always good vibes. It's like it's always a good like conversation when you run into wrestling fans just
Yeah.
out on the street. Like
Yeah.
I did this is kind of a fun example. So I did the book release event was in Huntington Beach, California.
Okay.
So at the Barnes and Noble there, and it was great. And the night of the event, actually before the event, I was wearing an NWO hoodie or
Yeah.
shirt, and I walked into the lobby of the hotel where we were staying, and the guy at the front desk was like, "Oh, great shirt." I'm like, "Oh, do you know that I'm here? I just wrote a book about the NWO. Like, you're a wrestling fan." He's like, "Are you kidding me? Are you serious?" He's like, "I'm wearing a Cody Rhodes shirt right now underneath my uniform." I'm like, "Are you? Come on, really?" It was just so
Yeah.
cool. Like when I wear wrestling shirts all the time, and I
Yeah.
just love I love the interaction. I love meeting
Mhm.
wrestling fans. I love sharing it, because I haven't had one bad interaction with a wrestling fan out in the world. Right? It's always good. It's always a positive vibe, and I encourage people to you know when your wife gets out of the shower, don't turn it off. Keep it
Yeah,
on.
leave it on.
Wear that wrestling shirt. Wear it on your sleeve. Be happy, be
Yeah.
proud to be a wrestling fan. Let's eliminate that stigma, and I hope that this book helps with that.
No, absolutely. And again, like I said, I think the book does a good job of transcending just the sport. So it kind of, blends in, and it can explain kind of more than, kind of the hook of why, beyond just the guys beating each other up. This is kind of what the take from it is. So I think it's a strong message, and it's something that we all try and do in this community is pull everybody together. And the t-shirt example is the best one. I love that when you bump into somebody like, hey, nice shirt. You're like, here we go. It's a combo.
That happens so many times, KJ. I bought an NWO hoodie.
Yeah.
It's in the introduction of the book, and in 2021 when I first started working on the book, and I wore it on every trip that I took to cover the UFC, and that was like multiple times a month that I was on a plane. And I gotta say, like 90% of the time, someone recognized the logo, pulled out the Turkish wolf, or sung the theme song. Like, I mean, made some kind of a reference to the NWO, and I just love that. I love that, and it really made me feel like doing this book was something bigger, than what maybe I had even realized, because it meant so much to so many people. And I'm talking about people from all walks of life, men, women, people of color, I mean, it's just so cool, like to see that, wrestling has touched that many people from like all kinds of folks. And I love that about wrestling. It's one of my favorite things about it.
No, absolutely. And it's why we do what we do. So it's that passion, but again, it's uniting people through a common bond. Now, just before we get out of here today, what's next? Now, we know you're a busy man. We know you got a full-time gig, but has this kind of sparked a writer, that writing bug in you? Is there other topics maybe in wrestling or otherwise that you've kind of flown around the cranium?
If I had a beard as incredible as yours, KJ, I would be stroking it right now and deep in thought. There you go, deep in thought. Mine is kind of a mess. It's all patchy and whatnot. But let's just say I have some ideas for future projects. Nothing is decided yet. Nothing is official by a long shot. Not even close. But there have been some discussions. I'll leave it at that.
So there's a good chance we'll see something more in the future.
There have been discussions. That's all I'm saying.
I like it. I like it. No, like I said, I know you have a busy schedule with everything going on. You've done so many interviews promoting this book. What I've gotten into it so far has been outstanding. Again, I think it's a really nice approach to a topic. And in this form, like you said, not a whole lot of books, if any, specifically about this topic. So it's awesome. We hope to see you do more. And greatly appreciate you coming by the channel here today.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it as well.
Now, do you want to let everyone know where they can? I know you mentioned some places, but where can we track you down? Where can we find you? And we know we can get you on ESPN.com and such as well.
Yeah, the book is everywhere pretty much. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, really wherever you get your books. Independent bookstores, shout out, to them. It's always good to buy from them, right? Small businesses. And as far as my social media, just Marc Raimondi on X, no spaces, and on Instagram, Marc Raimondi Sports. Pretty simple.
Perfect. Well, once again, thank you, sir. We look forward to it, folks. If you haven't picked up your copy, or you can even listen to the audiobook version of it, go check it out. It's an outstanding read, and a very good, like I said, a new perspective on something that we've talked a lot about over the years. But huge thank you to Marc. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, be a part of all the shows, be a part of all the fun. We got more coming your way. Don't miss out. Until next time, I'm KJ White. Mr. Marc, thank you so much.
Thank you, KJ. Appreciate it, man.